This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every episode, it is the surly Robb Reinhold.
Wow, I must be surly today, even though it's kind of my default. No, that's not true. I'm the most optimistic pessimist you will ever meet.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I'm a little less of a pessimist than you. I always try to stay optimistic, but yeah, we're realists at the same time. And we're going to be a little surly today, though, because we're continuing our series on pet peeves. Yes, traders, there is so much that Robb and I just cannot stand about all of you that we had to break it up into 2 episodes. And we are moving into part 2. And Robb, how do you want to do this? I have 1. You are extra surly, and you have 4 today. So you tell me how you want to break this up, and I'll follow your lead today.
Right. I only have 1 pet peeve, but I have 4 subtitles or subchapters of this pet peeve. So why don't you go first and take care of yours, and then I will try to keep mine to a minimum length, if possible.
Okay, sounds good. So mine is not something that really bothered me at first. I think because I used to actually do this. And then over time, I would hear other people say it, and I think it just made me look back and say, you know what, this is such a dumb excuse. And it's not only a dumb excuse, it doesn't get anybody anywhere. And it just doesn't seem like it can ever lead to anything positive. And that is blaming external factors in the market for losses and overall lack of success. So let's take this to Forex. People blaming the fact that Jerome Powell and the Fed are a thing and have been a thing for the last maybe 2 years, maybe 3, depending on how you look at it. It seems like we were just getting out of that really dead period in trading, finally coming into a period where volume was back and we could rely on our charts and they would always tell us where to go. And now here comes extra news that we have to deal with. And the amount of belly aching I heard from this one thing, we could talk about other things too, but I want to kind of harp on this one because I think it's the main one because it really is. I mean, it is messing with our trading. It just is. But Robb, there's always going to be something out there that's messing with our trading. We are never going to get complete blue skies. We're never going to get all green lights ahead. There's always going to be things in our way because that's how Forex trading is and that's how life is. And you cannot complain these things away. And it drives me crazy. I think the real traders out there, just like we said before, we understand what the chessboard looks like. We understand we can't complain if there's a pawn where we don't want a pawn to be. That's where it is. And that's the game we have to play. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And what if this or other things like this have come up more than once, with your traders over the last few years?
Well, Patrick, I've been doing this for a long time now. And yes, Jerome Powell is the current villain in a lot of people's stories that they tell themselves. But before that, it was Janet Yellen who was the villain. And before that, it was Ben Bernanke. And before that, it was Alan Greenspan was the person that made everyone's trades go bad. Now, I remember back in, this is maybe late 90s, early 2000s, they would show a picture of Alan Greenspan walking into the Federal Reserve, and they were studying the size of his briefcase. And if it was a thick briefcase, then people were saying it's going to be a cut in interest rates. And if it was a thin briefcase, then that meant that there was going to be no cut in rates, or they're just going to stay the same. Now, can you imagine? I bet there was somebody out there that made a trade based on the size of Alan Greenspan's briefcase, and they lost money because of it, and they're like, that damn Alan Greenspan, why didn't he put more in his briefcase? So look, yeah, it's the current boogeyman, but look, that is trading. There is randomness that we're all dealing with. You can put any name to randomness, but it's your system that has to be able to deal with that randomness, and that was created by you. Do you remember the Alan Greenspan debate?
I don't remember that debate. I can't remember if I was really trading during Greenspan. I was definitely trading during Yellen and Bernanke. But to push back a little bit, I don't remember them affecting the Forex market the same way Jerome Powell has. I mean, you've been through this too. There were certain events that you could not really sleep through, but not pay a whole lot of attention to. And it just really does seem like it's a different ballgame now.
Well, I think the reason it sounds like a bit different ballgame now is that we've had a very active FOMC over the past 2 to 3 years. But if you take a look back at, from 2010 to 2000 and let's call it 17, all they did was raise 0.25% every couple months when it was necessary. Like it was very, very boring. But then you could say, well, what about Grexit? Or Brexit? And what about Grexit, where Greece was looking? It was something else. It's just a boogeyman. Look, volatility is volatility. And volatility is going to come through any matter of ways out there. It might be a person. It might be a country. It might be a disease. It might be something. Here's the point. Trading is inherently, you're dealing with chaos. And anyone who's tried to model the financial markets, they can get pretty close, but there's always that unknown that blows everything up. And there was a very famous story about a hedge fund called Long-Term Capital Management. And these were all high-level mathematicians, and they said, we did it. We solved it. They built this algorithm back in 98, and it got so big that it almost took down the economies of the world. Take a look into Long-Term Capital Management, 1998, and you'll see that pretty much all the central banks around the world had to cut rates because they imploded, because they thought, oh, we have it so good, and only this one thing that will probably never happen is going to, be the thing that sinks us, and guess what? It happened. So you just have to learn how to deal with this stuff as a trader. If you blame someone else, you're not focused on fixing the problem.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought up Grexit too. That was the big excuse back in the early 2010s as well. Well, I can't get anything done, especially if I'm trading the Euro USD, because there's all this weird Grexit stuff. And to be honest, people were reacting very irrationally to every little minor news story that came out about that. And I even said at the time too, I'm like, who the hell cares if deadbeat Greece leaves the European Union? I mean, it seems like the most inconsequential departure out of all the countries in the EU. But yet people needed something to worry about, and so there it was. Now, apart from things like we just talked about, the Fed and things like Grexit, do you find your traders complaining about anything else typically that really doesn't have anything to do with trading, yet they seem to point to it as the reason for their lack of success?
Not directly, because, during our training, very early on, I basically address this issue. And I say, look, everything that happens is your fault. Whether you made money or lost money, it's your fault. I know there's things that are outside of your control that no one knows could happen. But you have to take personal responsibility for that, because that's the only way you can fix it. If you don't, then you're always going to be blaming outside. So it doesn't matter what it is. One of the things I do want to bring up that I heard, I don't want to say super recently, but one of the things is that, there are some people who believe that there are forces behind the market that are pushing things here or there and doing it for nefarious purposes. I don't disagree with that. I actually think there's probably some element of truth in that. But guess what? It doesn't really do me any good as a trader to blame them for my stop being hit. It does me no good whatsoever. What I should do is saying, hey, there's these forces at work. How do I trade in spite of these forces so I don't get knocked out at stops? That is a healthy way to deal with this. But if you just blame them, you're not doing yourself any favors.
You just described my Big Banks video, the one that's done over 3 million views on YouTube. It's what people needed to hear. It's like, look, there are external forces at play. There it is. That's how it's going to be. We've established this. Now let's talk about how to actually use this to our advantage and move forward. And that was the core basis for my entire channel. So I'm glad that was the one video that really got a lot of this started off, because without that, a lot of the other things I talk about wouldn't make sense. But you're exactly right. And so that's a perfect reply to something like that. The reply I give sometimes too is really what people don't want to hear, because then this automatically turns it back on them. I'm like, look, there's a lot of traders out there doing really well. There's a lot of no-nonsense Forex traders out there doing really well. I'm in the green, and I'm still getting emails and tweets and YouTube comments talking about how they just passed a prop firm test, and you can't be trading poorly to pass one of those. So there's people out there doing really well despite all this. Why aren't you? That's the question you really have to ask yourself at the end of the day. Now, if everybody out there was just completely eating shit, okay, fine. You just have to wade through these times, as do we all. But, if you can't sit there and blame certain things when other people are trading really well despite those things.
I want to go even more into a very singular moment in time. So let's say that you were on the wrong side of the trade when some sort of news came out or something happened. You need to understand somebody is just as happy as you are sad because they made the right choice or they were on the right side of it. That's where your focus should be. Understand that not everyone got taken to the cleaners. Some people are going out for drinks tonight because of that move. So the real impetus should be on, what do I need to do to get on the right side of this trade? And if I am on the wrong side, what's the right thing I do to manage my risk so I don't blow up? That is the life of a trader. I've always said the market is like a big wild animal. And as traders, we are on the outside of the cage. And when we step into the market, we are stepping into the lion cage. Anything can happen. Those lions can do anything they want at any time. Now, yes, sometimes they're tame. Sometimes they don't move that fast. Sometimes they're asleep, whatever. But when you step into that cage, you have to understand that the idea that you have everything under control is such a fallacy. Such a fallacy. You have to understand there is risk anytime you get in there, and you got to be ready for it.
Yeah, and I've said it many times on my channel. You are going to lose, and lose a lot. You just have to get used to that. And when you tell a brand new trader that, or somebody who's back tested an indicator and it did really well, that does not compute with them. But I'm looking, real life, this is going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot. And how you deal with these losses determines pretty much everything. So figure it out. Oh, and if you want proof, go back to Robb's Flat Earth Society experiment. Robb, what did you win, 40% of your trades, and you still killed it? I think
it was 41% win-loss.
Okay, so you lost 59% of your trades, and you still came out on top. And hopefully overall, most people, especially trading, the way I show on my channel, you're not going to take that many losses over the long term. But even if you do, if you simply handle them correctly, things will be just fine. So I guess that's really all we can say to that one. Robb, let's go ahead and move into yours. Give me a little overview on it, and then we'll hit the first point.
All right, thanks. I've been in this business for a while, but not as long as some other people. So I understand there's some people who have been in this business for longer. But I've been in a very unique situation to where, I started out as myself as a trader, started at the bottom, worked my way up, was able to get into this firm, was able to buy out the firm. And now I've been running a prop firm for the last 18 years. And I've been able to travel around and meet many other traders from other either prop firms or some trading banks or anything like that. So I've been able to meet a lot of people in the industry. Every now and then I bump into one of them that's really cocky. And boy, that just rubs me wrong, because I have seen cocky traders, some of my traders, some other traders. And let me tell you what I have always noticed. They go bust. They all go bust because they thought they were bigger than the market. No one's bigger than the market. One of my favorite books of all time is called Reminiscences of a Stock Operator, written by a gentleman named Edward Lefevre. They don't really know. This is an old book, I think 1930s is when this book was written. And it talks about supposedly America's greatest stock trader, a guy named Jesse Livermore. Now, they've tried to figure out who this Edwin Lefevre artist or author is. There's no record of him, and there's really not a lot of records of Jesse Livermore, but people think that they're the same person. But basically, it's an autobiography or a biography about America's greatest stock speculator from about 1910 to about 1930. And the story's great. It's a wonderful story. If anyone wants to read the book, I highly recommend it. There is nothing in there that you can use in the market today. This was someone trading in a bucket shop in 1910. I mean, off the ticker tape that was coming on, they were writing it up on the blackboard. Again, there's nothing in this book that's going to help you today as far as technical analysis. But the book is wonderful because it shows this person who rose up and killed it and kept getting better. And every time he got cocky, he lost it all. And he did that several times through his life. And the story is, it doesn't say this in the book, but the story is that he died broke and potentially killed himself. It's very unhealthy. It's very unhealthy. So whenever I meet cocky traders, I think, oh, they're just at one of their high cycles. I've seen this before. They're at the killing it part. They're killing it. They're doing great. But I know that if I talk to them in 2 to 3 years, they're probably going to be at the bottom where they've ruined it because they got cocky. Now look, everyone can live their life how they want. And if someone wants to be a cocky trader, be a cocky trader. I don't care. But here's what I don't love is that younger up-and-coming traders are going to look up to that person. And a lot of times, these people are the loudest people online, bragging, showing off their sports cars. And yes, I'm not saying they're lying, but what I'm saying is they're at the top. They're at the top of their cycle. And when you just simply follow them 3 years later, they're likely going to be at the bottom of their cycle. And I think it's really damaging to young up-and-coming traders that are looking at this, and kind of saying, that's what I want. You don't want that. You want slow and steady wins the race. You want to be humble. You want to understand that the market can squash you at any time. And I just think it's very unhealthy for young traders. And Patrick, I know you talk about these guys all the time, and they're always guys. Do you have anything to add to that?
Couple things maybe. Yeah, there's another book too that I've read about Livermore called Jesse Livermore Boy Plunger. It's a strange name, but they explain it in the book. And you're exactly right. Yeah, every time he got too good, he would lose everything. And there's so many parallels to his career and what you and I both teach in terms of money management and trading psychology. If he just had an ounce of those two things at any point in time, this guy never learned his lesson. But he did have a very unique advantage back then. He was super talented at the good part. He just couldn't somehow figure out the other part. And it's like, man, if you could just do both. I was talking to somebody in Discord the other day, and we were talking about his retirement account in terms of risk. And he said there's some things that he doesn't have a stop loss on. And I was like, well, I think you should have a stop loss on most things. Because I said something, I think it was you and I were talking. It might have been our last episode, where I said there's certain things I don't have a stop loss on. And he said, well, there's a lot of things I don't have a stop loss on because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, that's an easy thing to say because we haven't had a big recession in a very long time. I think once that happens, you're going to be really glad you had stop losses where you may not have wanted to. Because look at Jesse Livermore. Instead of losing everything, what if Jesse Livermore only lost 20%? Or maybe 30%? How much different would his life have been? How much different would his wealth have been? How much difference would there be in his overall happiness? He probably wouldn't have killed himself if that was the case. So it's just like little tiny things you can do that even the greatest investor of all time failed to do can make a really big difference because you're right. Trading, if you've ever traded for more than 6 months, it's the most humiliating thing you can ever go through. It's the most, maybe not humiliating, most humbling thing you can ever go through. Because just when you get cocky, just when I start saying to myself, even if I miss, I can't miss, and I start believing that is exactly when I fall apart. And I even have the right money management. That's when I'll take like 4 or 5 losses in a row, and it will erase everything I just did.
Well, look, Patrick, we've been doing it long enough that we probably, and I'm not going to put you in this. I'll just say for me, there were probably times in my early career that I was a cocky trader, that I was puffing my chest out and be like, oh my God, look at me. But I just hadn't been through enough cycles, up and down cycles, to understand that, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's great now. You're kicking ass, but we know how this works. You're going to cool off. There's going to be a period where then you are under your averages. Like, let's not get cocky when that happens. So when I see these cocky traders, and again, I probably at some point in my early year was walking around with my chest puffed out. I probably said some things that were really lame to other people and boastful. And look, I understand that. But again, when I see these traders, it just kind of reminds me of back then, oh, I hadn't been through enough cycles yet. I still had some things to learn, and that attitude I had was false bravado because it was simply on one of my upswings. That was it. So that's why, like I said, it bothers me because I think it's unhealthy for other people to see that. And that's really the reason it bothers me. If you want to be cocky, be cocky. I probably was at one point in my early career. I'm not proud of that, but it probably happened.
Yeah, just so everybody knows out there, and I'm mainly talking to newer traders because they're the ones who fall for things like this. If you see somebody, any kind of trader, flexing on YouTube or TikTok or anywhere, one of two things is going on. One, they either caught lightning in a bottle and they had the presence of mind to take profit, which is good, but that's the reason they have all that money. Not because they're actually good at this. I'm not going to say they're completely lucky. There was a little bit of skill involved maybe in what they chose to put their money down on. But that's where the money, or that's where the wealth, implied wealth, I guess, is coming from. Or number two, all that stuff's rented and they're just trying to sell a lifestyle that's not even real. Because I guarantee you, take these people you see right now doing any of those things and create a little digital time capsule. Go to a Google Doc or just write down on a piece of paper. Write down these people's names and then wait until right now, today's date, 2027. And then go back and see if those people are still around. I bet they won't be. They're not actually good traders. Good traders, one, don't spend the profits they make on flashy things. I understand that's how you sell and hook suckers in. And I understand that you probably want to listen to somebody who's driving a Ferrari as opposed to me who doesn't even own a car. I get that. But there's a difference between real traders and absolutely fake traders. And a lot of people in that first year or two, they have the wrong idea about trading because of leverage, and they think it's going to get them out of this hole quick. It's not. That's just the reality. And if you follow those guys, you're going to follow them right down. I don't think I have to really explain this anymore, but there's a reason. I just want to break down the reason why you see what you see. It's not long-term trading that got them there. Certainly not.
And one of the other things that bothers me about these traders, I'm going to talk specifically about Maverick now, is that, we have people submit applications all the time to us. And I talk to my recruiters, and my recruiters have been doing this for, I've got one recruiter that's been with me for 17 years, another's been with me for 12 years. So they've been with Maverick for a very, very long time. And the call that they like the least is the person that's been doing this for 15 years and thinks they're hot shit. When I talk to my recruiters, they always tell me these are the worst calls to get on because you just have to sit there and listen to them brag and say how much they know. And then we've brought some of them on before, and yes, some turned out to be pretty good and some turned out to be pretty lousy when you actually put money behind them. Here's the thing I found out. Those kind of people are not willing to learn new things. And that again, the market's always changing. The market's always changing, always being more dynamic. And if you don't have that thirst to learn new things, you will get passed by, and your system that you may have had years ago isn't going to work anymore. We have people that are former floor traders on the Chicago Board of Option Exchange, yet they haven't ever traded online. It's a totally different ballgame. You have totally new skills, but they think, I don't need to learn new things. I used to trade on the floor of the CBOE. yeah, guess what? It's a totally different world. So I find that these people are not humble enough to learn new things. I love when we bring on a new trader that has a new strategy that I've never seen before. And they'll turn in their trading plan to me, and I'll look over it, and I'll be like, boy, I don't think this is going to work. But you know what? They got the numbers to back it up. So let's see. I have personally added to my trading strategies that I thought were insane and there no way would work. And then after like watching them for 6 months or a year, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I got to add that to my repertoire. So look, you've got to be open to learning new things. And if you're cocky and you think you're hot shit, you pretty much close your brain off to that.
Yeah, well, now I'm wondering what Cedric thought of me when he talked to me, because I brought something pretty new to the table. Maybe that's why you guys brought me on. I was using indicators and a combination of indicators, which almost nobody was doing back then. And I had numbers to back it up. Maybe that's why I got on. Who knows? It's so funny you say that, thinking back. I get that comment on YouTube sometimes, and they always throw the experience out there. And I always think back, too, to jobs I've had and some of the worst people at those jobs. Just cancerous people, but you couldn't get rid of them because they knew every step of the handbook on how not to get fired. And anytime you would challenge them on anything, they would always lead with, I've been here 20 years. We'd be like, yeah, and you've been terrible for 19. It doesn't mean anything. So it is funny you say that, even though you and I are both experienced, and we do talk about our level of experience here on the show, just to qualify ourselves, I know exactly what you mean. I know the type. I've dealt with them too. So that's funny. You can be overly cocky early on, or you can be overly cocky 15, 20 years in. Doesn't matter. There's two different types. So anything you want to kind of end off on with this point? I think we've gone into it fairly well. Is there anything else to add on?
No, I really just hope that anyone who has listened to that last rant, and that's you, and you've thought, hey, I'm going to go check out Maverick Trading. Well, now you know. You can just skip on by.
Right on. Well, then I guess on that note, I've gone over mine. You've gone over yours. We talked in last episode, why these things are happening. I'm not sure what would lead to this level of cockiness for experienced traders. I can't figure that part out. The cockiness on newer traders, I totally get. You find something that works, you get these huge delusions of grandeur. I thought everybody on Wall Street was stupid, and I was going to crush them in every possible metric. I've been there on that one. So I get that. The cocky trader later in life thing with the more experienced angle, can you maybe point to something psychologically where this might be happening in their world?
Absolutely. And, when you say experienced trader, everyone has different ideas of what that means. Some people say that's more than 5 years, 10 years, 15. Let me tell you what I've found. Most people, they've had a lot of success with a certain strategy. And in the mid-2000s, it was selling strangles in options. If you don't know what it is, it's basically you sell options and they expire worthless. And as long as the underlying doesn't move too much, you get to keep, free premium. And that was a big deal, and it really got fire, and everyone got really into it. And there was this woman called Karen the Super Trader. And Thinkorswim actually put her out front, like, hey, be like Karen the Super Trader, be like her. And everyone followed, and everyone was opening up websites to show you how to do this strategy. And you know what? It blew up. That's what I've mostly found, is that people have a strategy that they've used that's been really good. Right now, it's zero DTE options. If there is a bubble happening in the market, it is with zero DTE. They now have options that expire every day, and these traders will come and just sell those options and just collect the premium every day. And as long as the S&P doesn't fall 5%, it's like easy money. It's like easy money. Like 10, 15 cents a premium times 1,000 shares. It's easy. What's going to happen is that is going to happen one day. And it's going to completely devastate accounts because people are over leveraging themselves. So it's really more strategy based than anything. When someone has been doing this for 15 years, 20 years, they've had to do different strategies. If they haven't, then usually we find out they don't have the numbers to back it up. People that do have the numbers to back it up, They're always changing. They're always staying up to date on the market, and they usually are much less cocky.
Yeah, once people hear what I do, sometimes I'll hear these theories too. Oh, you trade too? And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And sometimes they do have these can't fail strategies. And I'll always ask them, like, all right, so how could this possibly go horribly wrong? What would have to happen for it to fail? And a lot of times they don't have an answer. They're just like, really nothing because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, we're done. Because you know this. There's always something that could take something like that down, and there's always something that does, and when it does, they're not ready for it. They have no fail-safes in place, because why would you? It's the magic system. It's the system that never fails.
Patrick, don't you remember when oil went negative? No one had that on their bingo card.
I didn't even think that was possible. Maybe that's because I don't know how futures work, but I thought that was wild, and if I had half a mind, I would have bought. But it's like, okay, if it can go negative, it can go further negative, right? So, man, yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, I know so many people, or anecdotally on Twitter, that got wrecked on that too. So, yeah, anything can happen. It always has. And these people go right back into the graveyard with everybody else. So I guess on that note, Rob, do you have anything more to add here, or should we close this one out and maybe have an earlier...
Nope, I feel much lighter. I feel like I've got a lot off of my chest. So I'm feeling better about this therapy session.
Are you feeling less surly?
I am. I'm feeling less surly. Thank you.
Well, we have done our job here, and thank you, everybody, for joining us here on the Trading Psychology Podcast. Rob and I will see you next episode.
Goodbye, everybody.